What's going on, everybody? It's your boy back at you again with another Tommy Reads X-Men. Today, we are looking at X-Men number 31 from April 1967, written by Roy Thomas with Warner Roth back drawing, whereas this one's called We Must Destroy the Cobalt Man. And if you haven't guessed it from the title, it's the first appearance of the Cobalt Man. And we kick it off like we normally do, with the training montage in the danger room. The X-Men are going through the paces, Papa Chuck's working them out, and they're doing really well. They start talking about all the crazy stuff that's been happening to him recently, and Charles pulls that same thing he always occasionally, and he says, "You know what, X-Men, you guys have been working hard. You deserve a day off." Now, if you've been following these videos and reading the X-Men like me, you know that a day off for the X-Men never ends well. It never ends well for them. They're always battling some weird thing in the middle of New York where they get blamed for it and whatnot. So, if I was the X-Men, I'd be like, you know what? Let's just go through the danger room training some more today. Like, I don't want to deal with end of the world nonsense. But Papa Chuck's insisting. He's like, you guys get ready to go, have a good weekend or whatever. I'll see you on Monday. I'm going to do some experiments and talk about, maybe start to investigate this Factor 3. Factor 3, that's the only time we get it mentioned. 3 months of teases and one panel mentions about this Factor 3. I know it's going to be a disappointment when we get to it at this point, because I built it up in my mind. I've built it up, and it's going to be a disappointment, I know it, but we're not going to deal with that this time. Iceman and Beast decide to go on a double date like they always do during these days off. Angel's like, I'm just going to go drive around or whatever. And Scott was just going to hang around the mansion because he's sad and emo Scott like that. But what ends up happening is Papa Chuck decides to play matchmaker. Yep, he's like, oh, Scott, can you take these books to Jean at the college? Because I had to return them to her. And he's like, oh, Jean? Why, certainly, sir. And in Papa Chuck's bloop bloop in his mind bubble, he's like, Scott ain't gonna do this on his own. I need to help him out. And then he's like, I could tell he likes her, she likes him. Besides, I read their minds all the time because I'm weird like that. But yeah, I mean, he ain't gonna do it on his own. So Papa Chuck trying to hook his son up with his daughter? I don't know. Anyway, so Scott's all excited to go to Jean, and then Warren rolls up. And he hits him with the... He's blocking him. He's like, oh, I'll go with you to the school, Scott. Even though earlier in the exercise, he and Angel kind of made good. They're like, oh, I'm glad we're on the same team here. And they're like, yeah. But they're like the original frenemies, I guess, if that's even the term anymore. Because they're like both wanting them some Jean, but they still want to be friends. And I don't know. It's like a weird thing. All right, so we cut to Jean. Oh, they're on the way there. Jean's at college with our boy Ted. He's still in the game, y'all. Ted's still rocking it. And he decides it's time for Jean to meet his older brother, Ralph. Ralph comes up and he's like, greetings, Tiger, to his own brother, which was weird. I don't know if Tiger was a common, catchphrase back then. But, it'd be like the equivalent, be like, hey, what up, I guess. Or like, if you're from the Bay. But anyway, so Ted and Ralph start talking, and it turns into this, like, I can do better than you kind of pissing contest. And they decide to settle things at the stadium of the college by pole vaulting to see who's the best pole vaulter, I guess. And so Ralph goes first. The pole that he's using snaps because it was a discarded one. I guess they said it was just one that happened to be lying around the field, which I guess that happens all the time. I don't know. I'm not, as you can tell by looking at me, my pole vaulting days are better behind me. This close to the Olympics, not really. But anyway, I don't think I've ever tried it, and will never try it. But so it doesn't go well for Ralph because the pole snaps. He hits his head. And then he's like, oh, I'm fine, whatever. Ralph Robertson, boy industrialist, which he calls himself, which is weird. Who refers to himself like that? He decides to, shake off the hit to the noggin. And he goes and decides to take Jean and Ted to lunch. And there he starts talking about his backstory of how he worked at Stark Industries. And he and Tony Stark didn't get along because he wouldn't reveal to him who Iron Man was. Now, at this point, they don't know that Tony's Iron Man. Like, if you haven't seen the movies or read the comics in the past 80 years, that's a big spoiler for you. But, you know, you had 80 years to do this. Come on now. So, we all know Tony Stark's Iron Man, but they did not know back then. They just thought it was his bodyguard, old Shellhead. You know, that's what you call him. But, so Ralph's upset with Stark. He quit, and suddenly, out of nowhere, as if they have some kind of homing tracking device on her, which we'll get to later, Scott and Angel show up, and they're like, G-Day! And she's like, oh, hey, guys, what's up? Pull up a chair, you know? And then everybody else is like, oh, God. Like, so everybody's blocking everyone, and they decide to go check out Ralph's lab. Now, it's Ted, Ralph, Jean, and Scott. Angel decides, you know what? I'm good off going to a lab. I know when, you know, I'm out. I'm out for this race for now. And he leaves. So they go to take off to the lab, and we cut to Bobby and Hank on their date. Now, they're at the coffee shop where they normally go with the girls, if not to the movies. And Bobby's girl, Zelda, she is infatuated with the poet that's up on stage, the beatnik poet. And Bobby starts getting mad, you know, between Ted and Ralph and Angel versus Scott and Bobby and this poet. Man, this issue, even though it was called We Must Destroy the Cobalt Man, it should have been called the Mr. Steal Your Girl issue, because that's what's going on in this thing. The whole issue is just people trying to steal other people from people. A lot of people stealing. But we go, and Warren, we cut to him, and he's ended up in a random club, and he runs into somebody he knew from childhood named Candace, or Candy, as he kept calling her. And they talk, and that really doesn't go anywhere. But that's what Angel's up to. So Ralph, Scott, Jean, Ted at the lab, and Ralph is like, Ted, get over here, brother. And he's like, let me show you this suit I built. And he's like, wow, that's like Iron Man's suit. And he's like, yeah, but it's built out of cobalt. And he's like, okay, you know, that's cool. And Ralph puts it on, and suddenly he starts talking crazy, like, you know, I'm going to get revenge on Stark and on Iron Man. I'm going to go destroy Stark Industries with this suit. It gives me power. And then Ted's like, this must be the knock to the head talking, the concussion. Nah, you know, I know you want to see the best in everyone to Theodore, but, you know, this is like villainy right here, straight up. I mean, you aren't around it a lot, because Jean and Scott will see it later and be like, oh, this is a villain. But they were off looking at some weird map while he got pulled aside. And when Ted objected, he's like, you're talking crazy, bro. Ralph hits him with the pimp slap. He, like, put his hands on Ted. Ted's out for the count because he had a, you know, cobalt suit he backhanded him with. And then Jean and Scott go to investigate. Now, right before, there was a bunch of explosions and, like, you know, Cobalt Man busted through the roof and stuff like that to show his power to Ted. You know, Scott was just about to ask Jean out. And Cobalt Man in this explosion, the biggest oh, man. Like, Scott can't catch a break. And even Jean was like, I think he was about to ask me out, but I guess he's not. So for some reason, they always carry their uniforms on them. This is the theme throughout the whole issue. The X-Men were on dates and stuff, but suddenly in their back pocket, they had their uniform just nicely folded up, like as a space emergency blanket. So they change in their outfits like that, and it's Jean and Scott versus the Cobalt Man. It's going okay for him, and then he, like, blasts, like, repulse beam thing. Like, I don't know what it sounds like, but he shoots the beam, and it knocks down something, and they're kind of buried under some rubble, and Jean's kind of keeping them from being crushed with her mind, like, using her power, and Scott's blasting through, and he's like, of course. Just so happens that they never mentioned this before, but he's like, let me use the watch radio that Professor X gave us to contact him in the off chance that he shut his mind off to us, like he said he was gonna at the beginning of the issue. Almost like he knew this was gonna happen, but all right, whatever. And so Jean's like, dang, why didn't I think of that? And he contacts Professor X. He's like, Professor, we cut to Papa Chuck, who's in his lab, and he's got beakers going, and for some reason he's got mice in a cage he's experimenting in. What this has to do with Factor 3 or anything, I don't know. And he's working on, and then he gets the call, he's like, oh, let me read Scott's mind. You know what? they're in danger, but not like danger. So I'm just gonna go ahead and contact the other X-Men. This ain't my problem. And he goes back to his experiment. He's like, they good. This is what I train them for. You know, if they don't get some action in the field, then what are we doing here? So the other X-Men get broken up from their various dates and, broings about town. And then they end up heading to Stark Industries. Now, when I'm reading this, I've realized using this transmitter was exactly how Angel and Scott found Jean. They weren't going to go about the school like, Jean, are you here? Jean? But no, they used this like tracker, this Jean tracker, like to find her at the diner, which, at first it seemed coincidental, but nah, they tracked her down, son. So Beast, Angel, and Iceman meet up, and they decide to go to Stark Industries rather than go to Scott and Jean. And so there they see the Cobalt Man who's about to blow up Stark Industries. Where's Tony Stark? Where's Iron Man, you ask? Stan Lee gives us a little box and says, oh, Iron Man was on a date. What? Like, why? Number one, everyone's on dates in this issue. In the Mr. Steal Your Girl issue, you don't have Tony Stark trying to steal your girl? Anyway, he would be up in... Tony's not there. He's on a date, and you think, like, some alarms would be set off or whatever, and he'd be there to try to, save his lab. But no, he's like, cool, I'm watching a movie. And the X-Men end up showing up. The whole team strong, because Jean and Scott show up in costume with Ted in his Scooby-Doo looking van, and they decide to fight the Cobalt Man, and it's going okay for him. And Iceman ends up freezing the Cobalt Man's suit, so the power doesn't work, and he falls into a river, because there's always a river to fall into. And Angel ends up saving him from drowning. They get his helmet off, and right away, rather than get in jail for villainy, he starts blaming the head injury. He's like, yeah, that was it. Totally, Ted. Good call. I'm concussed. I'm not in my right mind. The end of the issue, Jean kind of turns away and she's like, I wonder if Ted knows it's me, in this like thinly veiled little costume that she has on. Clearly, she's the only redhead that we see in college who's not Mary Jane. End of issue. All right, let me hit you with some final thoughts in a minute. All right, I'm going to give this one a 6.5 out of 10. And let me tell you why. Because it was Ted-centric, which was good. You're pulling for Ted. Although if you're Ted, you're like, why are these people always hanging around her? They ain't her family. And a bunch of crazy stuff always happens. I mean, if I was Ted, a friend, I'd be like, run, girl, run. But he ain't. He's sticking in there. So, I don't see it ending well for Ted, but we'll see what happens. There was no Iron Man, even though the battle was at Stark Industries, which was weird. And he had, I'm sure there's other labs, but still, you think he would go investigate a fight at his own place. The one panel mention of Factor 3 for the third month in a row is starting to get on my nerves, because now I've built it up in my head, just like I'm sure the readers did in 67, and then they were like, oh, this is going to be it? Because I know that's what's going to happen. I'm going to be like, oh, that's it? Like when Charles fought Lucifer, I was so excited for that. And then it was just some weird alien. Anyway, so Papa Chuck saved his appearance in the issue of being a classic jerk. He's like, oh, nah, that's light work for the X-Men. Take care of it. And if they don't, we get the stalling of Jean and Scott's relationship, which is going at a snail's pace, man. Dang, I didn't think it took this long for them to just go for a malt or egg cream, which I've never had. Leave it in the comments if egg creams are good. Anyway, yeah, and the action was just all right. So all that equals a 6.5 out of 10. If you like what you're seeing, or were mildly entertained at least, please like and subscribe down here. Hit that bell notification somewhere in the corners there to keep you updated when we're updating. A lot of great things on the channel. If you like food reviews, if you like pop culture, comic books, this is the channel for you. If this is your first time watching, welcome. If this is your 15th time watching, thank you for checking us out. We'll be back again next week with another Tommy Reads X-Men. Later.